Hello, hello! Good morning to all of you beautiful people out there. I hope you all had an amazing start to your week, and I'm sure you'll have a great end to it as well. I scheduled an eye exam the other morning on my way to the coffee shop to do some writing. Something is up with my latest prescription, so I just wanted to update that. Anyway, my point is, does anyone else love the smell of an optometrist's office? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the feeling in general of being in there. It's calming and peaceful. I enjoy eye exams. I don't know. I'm weird. I just kind of want to go back and sit in there for a bit and sniff the air until someone says something. Oh my god. Last night, I was sniffing the air. In my room, I had the window open, and a neighbor of mine was doing their laundry. Whatever they're using as dryer sheets, I need in my life. I legit had to close the window so I could go back to focusing on the task at hand. I felt like a puppy. But enough about my weird lifestyle. We have much more interesting things to cover today. As in the past, once I find an era, location, style of story, I have a habit of sticking with it for a while. And if you were around last week, we talked about a sadistic cannibal and killer of children. And that took place in the mid to late 1900s Germany. I firmly believe there could be a podcast dedicated entirely to serial killers in Germany in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There's an endless amount of them. And today we tackle another one of those terrifying people and their heinous crimes. Today, I bring you the story of the Aachen Strangler. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from All That's Interesting, Wikipedia, and the rest I will put down in the notes. From the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders to Kai, the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker who went viral many years back, stories of people being killed while traveling the open road have gripped us true crime fans for years. However, there is a much lesser-known story of a killer who targeted young female hitchhikers in Germany in the 1980s and 90s, who had almost gotten away with his crimes. Investigators in Germany during this time were not immediately surprised by a hitchhiking murderer when their first victim was discovered in a pond in an unspecified area of West Germany. You see, there was a slew of unsolved hitchhiking murders in West Germany in the years leading up to this. For example, the Münsterland murders, which was a series of unsolved murders committed in the Münster and Bentheim areas of West Germany from 1971 to 74. According to Wikipedia, the 4 known victims were all young, petite, dark-haired women in their 20s who had hitchhiked prior to their disappearances. They were later found strangled without signs of sexual abuse, with their corpses posed in unnatural positions. This case still remains unsolved. Or there is the Heidelberg murders, an unexplained series of murders that occurred in Heidelberg in 1975. Like the Münsterland killer, the Heidelberg murderer's victims were all young women who often hitchhiked. However, all of his known victims were blonde and had visible traces of sexual assault. End quote. Still unsolved. And only 1 year after these murders, young women's bodies started appearing in the Rhine and Neckar rivers. Every victim was known to frequently hitchhike. They were known as the Rhine-Neckar murders. And yes, that one also remains unsolved. Which brings us back around to our first victim. In July of 1983 near Alsdorf, which is a municipality of Aachen, 18-year-old Marion Garek was attacked while waiting at a bus stop late that night. A man grabbed her from behind and dragged her into his car. Marion fought back, hard, breaking his windshield in the process. Although she had prevented him from raping her, the attacker still managed to strangle and kill poor Marion. He then stripped her and dumped her in a nearby fishing pond. Now, I'm not sure if there really wasn't much of an investigation. I would hope there is, and I think there was. I just honestly can't find much information. But her murder appears to go cold from the minute she was pulled from the water. The following year, in February of 1984, 15-year-old Andrea Wernicke was killed after leaving the nightclub Rock Fabric. Sorry, that's probably the most American pronunciation of that you'll ever hear. It was a music venue in Germany open from 1983 to 2019. Andrea had a knack for hitchhiking after a night out, which should be safer than driving your drunk ass home. However, that night, she was picked up by a monster who would rape her, strangle her, and dump her lifeless body in a nearby open field. Again, her case was cold from the get-go. But this time, we know that police obtained DNA from the attacker and kept it safe. It's assumed they found the same in or on Marion's body as well. On August 31st of 1984, 17-year-old Angelika Sell was assaulted and murdered in a very similar fashion while hitchhiking. In December of 1985, 18-year-old another Marion Lauvin, was abducted, raped, and killed in Aachen. She too had been standing at a bus stop. For an hour, the attacker drove across the country with her body in the trunk until he found a secluded area, and then he covered her bare body with leaves and left. Investigators would find DNA evidence on both of these girls' bodies as well. And finally, on June 16th of 1990, quote, Sabine Newman disappeared in Niederkirchen on the way home from the, quote, inside nightclub. The man had dragged the 31-year-old into his Mercedes, where he raped and strangled her. A year later, her skeletal remains were found by passerbys in a forest near Wegberg. The body was identified based on dental records, end quote. Again, thankfully, police found DNA evidence. But again, her case went cold as fuck. Thankfully, unlike the 3 other series of murders I briefly mentioned at the beginning, this is not the end of the story. However, it is the alleged end of his murder spree. According to the sources I have available, he didn't kill again, but I find that so hard to believe. Those kind of people don't just stop. You go from raping and strangling teenagers to just nothing. And we now know that he wasn't caught for any other crimes after the fact either. Years passed without movement in the case. 17 years to be exact. But you know what the investigators kept safe the entire time? For almost 2 decades? The DNA evidence. They kept that packed tight. Which apparently seems to be an issue for American police. What? We lost it. It's gone. Somebody threw it away. We didn't have space. Gosh, get off my friggin' back. But then, in 2007, everything changed. Police arrested a man in mid-March for attempting to steal scrap metal in Heinsberg, another area of northwestish Germany. His name was Egidius Schiffer, and up until that moment, he had a clean record. Whether or not he was required to, the man offered up a saliva sample, I assume in an act of good faith, to the investigators who, of course, processed it within the system. In the meantime, Mr. Schiffer was released after dealing with the theft charge, and I bet he never thought about that day again. Nor the investigators, to be honest. Months went by, and life went back to normal. But in August of that year, police received a call from their lab, and what came back shocked even the most hardened of detectives. That man they caught stealing metal a few months ago? Well, turns out he was responsible for the 5 unsolved murders over 17 years ago. Definitely not what they expected to hear that morning when they walked in. According to Wikipedia, he was arrested on August 23rd for murder and almost right away confessed. During the confession, he admitted to the 5 murders, but then almost right after, he recanted those confessions before the district court on the grounds that he had sadomasochistic tendencies. He only admitted to the murders because the thought of a pretrial detention and punishment had aroused him. And after he got off, he was like, never mind, I didn't do any of it. And later, he alleged that he was forced to confess. However, the court could rely on this confession of Schiffer, since he had, quote, disclosed perpetrator's knowledge in that confession, as well as the DNA traces present at the crime scenes which brought him in there in the first place. He was sentenced on August 19th of 2008 to life in prison by the Aachen Regional Court for 5 counts of murder and 2 counts of rape. And usually, this is where the story ends. But, oh no, Mr. Schiffer made the papers yet again when he passed away in 2018, after only serving 10-ish years for 5 murders. But he hadn't died under any normal circumstances. You see, in addition to everything else this fucked up man did, he was also very much into autoerotic asphyxiation. All That's Interesting explains, quote, Schiffer, who had been kept in solitary confinement in Bochum, Germany for the past 8 years, tied a cable from a lamp around his penis and then around his nipples. And the guards who unlocked Schiffer's prison cell said that his body was still hooked up to live electricity when they entered. A post-mortem revealed that the 62-year-old prisoner died of heart failure as a result of the electric current flowing through his chest. Quote, he removed a cable from his bedside table lamp. Then he wound it around his nipples and his penis and stuck the end in a power socket, said a prison spokeswoman, Candida Tunkel. In performing this autoerotic sex act, it is believed that Schiffer killed himself accidentally while masturbating to these electric shocks. There was no evidence of foul play, and the prison declared that there was, quote, no evidence of suicide. Schiffer's lawyer also said that his client was not suicidal, so it indeed appears that it was a macabre accident that had brought an end to Gigidius Schiffer's life, end quote. Gigidius. Fuck. And that, my friends, is the awful, awful, and somewhat happy ending story of Mr. Schiffer, aka the Strangler of Aachen. Did he not have a cellmate? Or did the cellmate just maybe the cellmate got off on him dying trying to get off. And he just had the best night ever. But, oh no, he was in solitary confinement. I just said that. I really enjoyed that one. And if you want, you can totally go down a rabbit hole of possible crimes or eerily similar crime scenes between him and other hitchhiker murderers and serial killers alike in Germany at that time. For example, he was he would have been young, but he could have been the right age and profile to fit that of the Münsterland murders, which is an interesting theory to think about, maybe a bit of a stretch. The 2 areas where the crimes took place is only roughly 2 hours apart. He would have been in his late teens to early 20s, same hair color description, and they both targeted young female hitchhikers. Just a thought. I don't know. It's probably been debunked. Anywho, thank you all for taking the time to listen in today. It means the world. And if you would like, stick around for a bonus story after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Well, we have quite an exciting update for you folks today. A recently solved cold case, my favorite, titled Arizona Man Gets Life in Prison in Murder of Wife Who, quote, vigorously struggled after being buried alive, from CBS News. An Arizona man has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the 2017 death of his wife, who was buried alive in a hand-dug grave near their home while their children slept. 7 years after the murder, David Pagnano decided to plead guilty before his trial was scheduled to start and allowed a judge to determine his sentence without a plea agreement. Pagnano, who is 62, also was sentenced on May 9th to a 16-and-a-half-year prison term for kidnapping, forgery, and fraud, according to the Yavapai County Attorney's Office. County Attorney Dennis McGrain said in a statement that his office had pursued the death penalty because of the, quote, horrific circumstances surrounding the abduction and murder of Sandra Pagnano. Sandra was kidnapped from her home while her children slept nearby, bound in packing tape, driven to a remote location, and buried alive, said McGrain. The evidence revealed she vigorously struggled while she was in that grave and was likely conscious for up to 5 minutes after being buried. Authorities say 39-year-old Sandra Pagnano disappeared while she was in the process of divorcing her husband in May of 2017. They said she and David Pagnano were separated, but still living in the same home with their 2 young daughters. Sandra's body was found bound and gagged in packing tape inside this hand-dug grave in a rural area north of Prescott, and the county medical examiner's office confirmed she had been buried alive. I assume that means the cause of death was suffocation? County sheriff officials said cell phone evidence showed David was in the gravesite area days before his wife went missing and the night of the kidnapping. Detectives recovered 2 notes that were filed in the divorce case after Sandra's disappearance, purportedly written by her. The note said that she was leaving David and giving him her vehicles, house, and custody of the children. But authorities said a forensic examination, or probably just looking at them, of the notes revealed that they were written by David and not Sandra. A grand jury indicted him on a charge of first-degree murder after his wife's body was discovered in a remote area 10 miles northwest of the couple's home near Prescott in north-central Arizona. McGrain said, "I hope the life sentence brings some closure to the victim's family." End quote. A bit of justice brought into this world of literally not justice, and it's nice to hear about. He, again, almost got away with it 7 years after, and he's finally paying for his crimes. Oh my gosh, that reminds me, it's been all over like Notice News or whatever that Snapchat thing is, but the preacher who claims his wife committed suicide, but there's a bunch of weird text messages and threats and all this other stuff, and they're investigating her death because it's super sus. Hold on, I'm gonna Google it and maybe there's more. Oh man, okay. I was wrong. I'm glad I didn't name names. So, apparently the evidence is overwhelming that she did. She did end her own life, and he was in a different area at the time. Still didn't seem like a very good husband, though. So, whatever. Alrighty. I think that'll about do it for me today, folks. Thank you all again so much for listening to me, of all people, today. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.